Welcome everyone to Couch Potato Diary, another podcast live stream on twitch.tv/primetimepk. My name is Peter Klein, and thank you very much for joining today. I think we got the technical issues on the streams all figured out, so going to start to really make a push with these next week. This is going to be a busy show today. We are going to start with looking at our NHL preview and some potential breakout players in the NHL this season, and then it's a Fights in Football Friday. We'll preview the week ahead in the National Football League and the Canadian Football League. Plus, we will go into the big cards happening from the UFC and the world of boxing coming up today. Should be a lot of fun. As always, the chat is open. If there's something you guys want to know, we're going to go through every NFL game. Fantasy stuff seemed to be pretty good, so we'll get that rolling as well. But yeah, chat is always open. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. Let's get into some hockey. All right, the NHL season is rapidly approaching. The prospects are off at various different development tournaments and whatnot starting this weekend. So we'll be getting into some of that, which I guess makes this topic of note, I suppose. Today, looking at who could potentially break out in the NHL this season. And some of these, I might be stretching breakout a little bit, I'll be honest. But I still, guys who I think can kind of level up going into this season. So first, a couple honorable mentions. Marco Rossi from the Minnesota Wild and Braden Schneider for the New York Rangers. Both of them, I feel like, have another level that they can get to. Maybe more Schneider than Rossi, but both of them I still think will take a bit of a step up this year. They just didn't quite make the list. Now, the first one is definitely cheating, but I do think he's going to break out in a big-time way, and that one is Connor Bedard. I think we just got a glimpse of what he can do with the Chicago Blackhawks a season ago, and I think that this is a really exciting player that everyone was kind of right on, and you can see that he is going to be something special, and I think we start to really get a grasp of that specialness coming up this season. Coming in at number 4, again, has kind of broken out already, but I think there is absolutely another level to the breakout that is coming, and that is Cole Caulfield. I think this is going to be a big year for the Montreal Canadiens, and I think that he is a player that has an opportunity here to really shine, given the bringing in Laine, another year of development, another year of staying healthy, and just what I believe to be a better hockey team as all these guys continue to develop is going to give him more opportunities. And so, yeah, he's already scored 28 goals. So maybe this, he doesn't necessarily fit this list, but I think that there is a second kind of act to the breakout that is coming for him. At 3, it's Dylan Holloway, finally with an opportunity, we would assume, with the St. Louis Blues. And yes, he is going to a team that isn't quite as good as the one that he was just on, that came within a game of winning the Stanley Cup. But Dylan Holloway is still a very, very good hockey player, and I think he has a real opportunity in what I would presume to be a bigger role. I think he has an opportunity to really shine and really show what he is capable of doing. I have always been a fan of the player, and I think that we're going to really see a big Dylan Holloway breakout in the upcoming season. At 2, I have Uri Slafkovsky. He has signed a contract as if he has broken out, but statistically, he hasn't really done that yet. I think this is the year he puts it all together. He was starting to put it together in the back part of last year. I think now he kind of understands the NHL game. I think he has a better grasp on everything, and I believe that we are going to see clearly the best version of Uri Slafkovsky this year. I think he's going to have an unbelievable year. And at number 1, it is Mason McTavish. I kind of thought he had already broken out. The stats don't really match what I think he can do and the level that I think he can get to. Again, I think he's going to be on a good Anaheim Ducks team. Good might be a bit of a stretch. An improved Anaheim Ducks team, that's better. And I think he is going to be someone who can really grow into another role with this club. So I think that this is a player in Mason McTavish that has a real opportunity here to break out. And I think, honestly, Anaheim kind of needs it. There's a lot of pressure on this team this year. And so I think that if they're going to finally start to progress a little bit, I think Mason McTavish is going to be a guy who can help them out with that. Okay, that is the NHL talk for the day. Now it's time, like I said, it's a Fights in Football Friday. Let's start with the football. So Fridays, I do a thing called a pick per game where I have to pick at least one play from each game in the NFL, and then there's a few that I click on. That part will be podcast only. There are certain rules against gambling and whatnot on Twitch, and quite frankly, I don't know what they are. They just say, hey, does this content have to do with gambling? And I'm like, well, kinda. But I don't, I think I would be okay, but I don't want to risk it when we're just starting these things off. And so for full picks that I clicked, rundown, you'll have to go to the podcast for that. So before we get into the full breakdown, though, it's the day after a scary situation on Thursday Night Football. You've all seen it by now. Tua Tagovailoa goes down in a heap. And it's another concussion, I believe the fourth that we have seen in the last couple of years. And it's scary. And so first and foremost is you just hope the guy is okay. Because you're getting into very scary territory with that. And it is something that affects the rest of his life in a significant manner. So you just hope that it is okay. We come across this in the fight world a lot where it's, well, this guy needs to retire. This guy needs to retire. And it's tough to tell someone they need to retire. But it will be, like, it was already a little bit like you were just starting to kind of ease into, okay, maybe he's not going to get hurt all the time with him. And if he does get out there, it's going to be uncomfortable to watch the entire time if he's out there and he's getting hurt. And I know you can't put a price on health. And I know that really what should be done is try to save this guy from himself if he wants to get back out there. Because we are talking about just a life-altering amount of brain trauma that he has had to endure in the last little bit. Like, when you get knocked out in that way, now twice, where it gets, like, everything just kind of seizes up and limbs are going in places that you wouldn't be if you were of this world, we're getting into very, very serious territory with this guy. And so I think hopefully the right decisions medically will be made for him as a person. Like he's made about $75 million. It's probably going to be okay. But that being said, he is in year one of a 4-year contract worth a guaranteed $167 million that could end up paying him around $220 million. That's a lot of money to just be like, yeah, deuces, man, I'm out. You know, that's quite difficult to pull off. In just like, yeah, nope, not gonna do it. Retiring. That's it. I'm out. I don't 167 what? No, I don't need that at all. That's a lot to just be like, yeah, I'm good. And so from a financial standpoint, again, you cannot put a price tag on health. But if you were telling me that I had all I had to do was just try to not get hit in the head for $167 million, I would try to not get hit in the head for $167 million, but still try to go out there and play. Like, it is a difficult decision, and one where medically there is absolutely a right answer. And honestly, there probably is a right answer anyway. Again, he's made over $70 million, and he probably, like, quarterback at Alabama, you can endorsement deals for forever. The guy can open a car dealership tomorrow and be set for the rest of his life out there, or at SEC Network or Dolphins, whatever. You know, like, there are other jobs that he could get coming out of this if he were to retire. You just, again, you hope he is okay, and you hope the right decision is made. All right, let's get into the preview for the upcoming Sunday. We start with Cleveland taking on Jacksonville. As the season goes on, these will get a little bit more statistically oriented. Obviously, eye test as well. But I feel like we need at least a couple data points before we can go in, oh, well, this team ranks 32nd in EPA per play. It's like, yeah, no shit, they had one bad day. Let's chill a little bit here. So we're not going to get too far into it. This is just going to be more gut feel type stuff for the first week or two doing this. It is Jacksonville. They are 3-point favorites, and the total sits at 41.5 for their game against the Cleveland Browns. The Jags had a lead against Miami, but lost it on a goal line fumble. I do worry that I think we're all just assuming that Cleveland's entire team is going to be bad. This defense was still very good last season. And while we do like to get on the Dallas Cowboys, they do have a pretty good offense. So I do think that there is because of Deshaun and because of the whole situation and because they're the Browns, it is very tempting to just be like, yeah, whatever, they suck, move on, play whoever you want. And I don't necessarily think that's the case. And so I would caution if I were looking at the Jags here. I would caution just assuming that this team is going to be awful. Because I do think that there is I do think there is something there, especially on this defensive unit. So I do think you have to be a little bit wary of that team. And so just be careful in assuming that this defense isn't going to be anything for the rest of the year. That being said, I do think that Jacksonville comes up with a win in this spot. Like even if we are underestimating this defense on Cleveland, I still think Jacksonville wins, and I still think they probably cover. But I do think the under is in play, because I don't think they score a lot, and Cleveland's definitely not scoring a lot. So 41.5 under, and Jacksonville are my official picks for this one. From a fantasy standpoint, there's probably better options out there than Lawrence this week at quarterback. You probably, if you had him, hopefully maybe a bit more of a quarterback 2 role for your team. I do think there'll be some deeper leagues that you can play him in, but I think that he's going to have a better real life quarterbacking day than a fantasy football day. I do think Thomas is a go for this week. I'm not sure about the rest. Also, Thomas is a good value in daily fantasy at 4.8K on DraftKings. Bigsby is an interesting watch and see to see what he does here in a second week. It looked pretty good in week 1. And does he start to eat into the ETN carries a little bit? And lastly, Jerome Ford is a start for me, and Amari Cooper as well. You kind of have to, given the draft capital that you would have used. But other than that, we're probably avoiding this week. Indianapolis taking on Green Bay. The Colts are 2.5-point favorites. The over-under sits at 40.5. I have no idea how Malik Willis is only a 2.5-point dog against a real-life National Football team. I am still a little bit concerned about the Green Bay defense and what they can do. I did pick this team to finish with the best record in the NFC. That seems very much out the window now. But there is still a bit of a concern on the defensive side, and there's obviously concerns on offense. Going up against the Indianapolis Colts, who gave up quite a few points, 29 to the Houston Texans last week. But I do think the Texans are a pretty good offense, so it's tough to get a real read on that. I do still think, again, both these defenses are a little but I do have major concerns about Malik Willis as a quarterback, and I think the Colts offense has a chance to put up some points. So I am going to say Indy minus 2.5 is my prediction here. From a fantasy standpoint, you're starting your Colts, right? Anthony Richardson bombs away. You have Pittman, of course. Jonathan Taylor, yep. We talked about Adonai Mitchell. That one's going to be a wait and see. But your main guys in this one, you're starting for the Colts. For Green Bay, it's a little different. I think they're going to be able to run the ball like Joe Mixon did for the Texans in week 1 against the Indianapolis Colts. So I think Josh Jacobs is actually a very good play this week. Reed had such a good week 1, it would be tough to sit him in week 2. I wouldn't be going Watson. I wouldn't be going Dobbs. Luckily, you probably drafted those guys in a spot where you don't necessarily need them. So I would be avoiding them and just kind of waiting and seeing what this offense might look like. Las Vegas taking on Baltimore. The Ravens are favored by 8.5 with the total at 41.5. I just don't know how Vegas hangs in this game. They have Devontae Adams, but that is kind of it for talent on the offensive side. Myers isn't bad either. Bowers is interesting this week, given the issues that Baltimore had in defending the middle of the field. And I know that it was more Rice running slot routes like that, but I do think that Bowers is going to have a real opportunity to put up some big points. We'll get to that in the fantasy standpoint of it, but overall, I don't think this offense is built in a way that they can take advantage of what looks like a few defensive holes on the Baltimore side. Now those holes showed up against Kansas City, so Vegas is not that. And defensively, like this Raiders team is not going to be able to slow down Lamar and all of these guys. So I think this is going to be a long day for the Vegas Raiders. For Baltimore, I liked how they played a lot against Kansas City in week 1. I thought they actually played a really good game. They just ran into the best team in the league. And Baltimore plays that way against almost anybody else this season, and they win that game. So I think that this is a opportunity for Baltimore to kind of style. I do think they cover 8.5. In terms of fantasy, Lamar, obviously you start. Flowers, you're starting this week against a secondary that doesn't seem to have much of a strength to it. I think that Baltimore is going to be able to put up some numbers, and I think this is going to be a bounce back for Andrews and for Derrick Henry. The Raiders, they do have Wilkins up the middle, so that makes it a little bit tougher to run on them, but they have traditionally had some real trouble against tight ends, and I think Mark Andrews is, now that the other defense isn't going to be specifically game planning to take him out, I think he's going to have a look. For the Raiders, it is Adams, and that's it. And for Baltimore, for Likely, and for Hill, probably just like if you picked them up because you needed them, then you're probably playing them anyway. But I would try to avoid it and just see. I think Hill is going to have a little bit more value even in a positive Baltimore game script than people are assuming. I think that there is always going to be room for a pass catching running back on teams, and so like it's not like Baltimore's just never going to be in third down in this game. And honestly, if Baltimore gets up by a ton, maybe they just go with Hill anyway and just rest Derrick Henry. So there is some room for Hill to have a big game in here. Back on the Raiders for fantasy. I know I said Adams and that's it. I do also want to include Bowers. I think he has a big week here this week. I think also he's a bit of an interesting play in terms of daily fantasy also. The LA Chargers taking on the Carolina Panthers. Chargers are favored by 5.5. The total is 38.5. I am worried that we are overreacting to how bad the Carolina Panthers looked in week 1, but this line is not an overreaction. And honestly, this kind of feels like one of the last times we'll be able to only have to give up 5.5 points when facing Carolina. So I feel like we should just take this treat and run. But there is one part of me that's like, we're giving benefit of the doubt to a few of these teams. And just because Carolina confirmed every concern we had in week 1, like maybe like we're saying, oh, well, it's week 1, everyone's a little bit rusty, whatever, except for those fucks who suck. I have concerns that we're overreacting a little bit, but overall, Chargers are a better football team. Even if we're not overreacting to Carolina, Chargers are a better football team. So they win this one. My pick is LA Chargers minus 5.5 and also the under. The Chargers aren't going to be putting up points. I know the total is only 38.5. I simply don't care. We'll just roll with that one. From a fantasy standpoint, Herbert struggled in week 1. This matchup looks really tempting and going to be difficult to pass up, given that Derek Carr lit them up for almost 30 fantasy points. McConkey is interesting. J.K. Dobbins, I think, is a must start this week, and I don't trust any weapon that Carolina has. Also, LA's defense at 3.4K in DraftKings is pretty dope, so we're going to roll with that. New Orleans taking on the Dallas Cowboys. Dallas 6-point favorites. The over-under is at 46.5. I think the Cowboys will dominate this game. I don't think the Saints are all that good. That they kicked the shit out of a bad team. I think this is going to be a come back down to earth moment a little bit. I do think overall the Saints have a good defense. I do think overall, though, Dallas has a good offense. And so I think they're going to be able to put up points. And I think, like, Derek Carr struggles mightily against pressure. Micah Parsons, really good at bringing pressure. And so I think Micah Parsons alone is going to be enough to game wreck this one. I think Parsons has a big day. I think New Orleans doesn't. I think the Dallas Cowboys win this one, and they win it more by 6. And I also think that the under covers in this one at 46. From a fantasy standpoint, you're starting Lamb. You probably have to start Dak based on where he was being drafted. If you can pick up a Stafford in this spot, I think that's a better play personally, but if you have to start Dak, I don't think you have to rush out and pick someone up, but it's just if Stafford's available, that's a better move. Zeke is an all right option at running back for New Orleans. Olave, I think it's a bounce back. Kamara, I think still looks quite good. Derek Carr is an absolute 100% no-go for me. Really awful football game as the Giants take on the Washington Commanders. Washington favored by 1.5. I have no idea in this game. Both teams are very, very bad. The only unit in this game that isn't just downright atrocious is the New York Giants defense. And so I think with a couple of the pass rushers that they have potentially giving problems to Jaden Daniels, I will go Giants plus 1.5. I do think rare will be the times that we get to actually get points and pick against Washington, so we just have to take advantage of that when we can, right? So we are going to do that. From fantasy, Neighbors is a must if he is healthy. Singletary if you are desperate. Daniels if you are desperate. And that's probably it. Jets taking on the Tennessee Titans. Jets are favored by 3.5, with the total sitting at 41.5. The Jets had a rough one in week one. I am worried about this defense. Last week, they got absolutely torched by San Francisco. Now, Tennessee is not San Francisco. But it does feel like with Pollard looking a little rejuvenated, I still think there's something there with Tyjae Spears. There's a chance Tennessee can run this ball on the New York Jets in the way that San Francisco did and really control this football game. Levis has to cut down on some of the mistakes, and I think Robert Saleh game planning against him is terrifying. So that is keeping me from clicking on this one. But I am going to take Tennessee plus the points at 3.5. From a fantasy standpoint, I think Pollard is an interesting play after Mason's game last week. I think you start your studs on the Jets side. I wouldn't be buying into Rodgers, and I wouldn't be buying into Allen Lazard. The team that the Jets lost to last week, the San Francisco 49ers. They take on the Vikings of Minnesota. San Francisco favored by 5 points in this game with a total of 46.5. This one is also very tempting to take San Francisco. They looked good on Monday against the Jets, and I think the Jets are better than Minnesota. The one thing that's keeping me from actually clicking on this game, and it's probably going to keep me from doing this against Minnesota a few times this year, home field is a real advantage for this team. And so I could see this being one of the red zone games where we keep going to it and keep going to it and keep going to it. It's like, how is this close? Why does Sam Darnold have the ball with 8 minutes left and it's a 3-point game and the Vikings have a chance to take the lead? Why? Why do we need to we need to ice this game away here with a late field goal or something? So I'm not going to click on it, even though I 100% see a world where we just wake up on Monday. It's like, well, the 49ers won by 50. Also, just going back to the other one, I can kind of see that with the Jets. I'm picking Tennessee in that game, but there is 100% a world where we're just like, oh, no, we overreacted to everything on both the Jets and the Titans. The Jets are quite good, and they just kicked the shit out of Tennessee, but that's not my pick. Anyway, back to San Francisco from a fantasy standpoint. You start your 49ers. I think Purdy is a really solid option this week. Also, I think he's getting better. So that's interesting. CMC, it was just announced while I was recording this that he's out for another game. So Mason becomes just an automatic start for you there. And also a very good play in daily. He's still just at 5.5K, although I wonder if they adjust that. It's more algorithm based, so I don't think they can. Although they might, if they want to. From Minnesota's standpoint, it's Jones, it's Jefferson, and I don't think you can trust anyone else. Seattle taking on the New England Patriots. The Seahawks favored by 3.5, and the total sits at 38.5. People are worried about Seattle. I think they're going to be fine. I think that they were a team that it was week one. It's a new coach. It's a new offensive philosophy. It's a new defensive philosophy. They got a soft landing spot against Denver. They now have 60 minutes of figuring out what this is supposed to look like in game action, and now it's going to be better. There are going to be rough stretches in this game. This is not going to be the most watchable football game. Probably not going to go down in the lore of Seattle against New England games by any stretch of the imagination. But I do think people are overreacting to things on the Seattle side. Pat's defense is going to keep this one close for a bit, but I think the Seahawks pull away and pick up a win. For Seattle, DK is a play. If you have Lockett, you're probably playing him. If you have JSN, there might be better options. That's not an auto play for sure against a pretty good defense. I do think that there's going to be a lot of focus on DK in this game. You have to start him, but I do think that could open things up for JSN and for Tyler Lockett in this offense. So I do think that they are interesting plays here this week. Charbonnet is a really strong play. Whether Walker's healthy or not, I was saying all offseason, we are forgetting how good this kid is. And he is a real viable option in the run game for the Seattle Seahawks. And don't start any Patriots ever. Tampa Bay taking on the Detroit Lions. The Lions favored by 7.5 points. I think this is a little disrespectful to the Bucs. I do think that Detroit is a very good team, but I think Tampa Bay with Baker Mayfield, Mike Evans, and this offense, I think they'll be able to kind of keep pace a little bit and at least try to keep this close. I think this is going to be a pretty high scoring game. And I do think that this is a very intriguing option for to take Tampa Bay and the plus. So we're going to take Tampa Bay plus 7.5 in this spot. it's going to be difficult for them to slow down Detroit, but I also think that Baker and this offense will probably put together a couple like 10, 11, 12 play drives and eat up some of that clock and keep this game closer than people expect it to. From fantasy, I don't think it is going to be a day to play Baker. I think it's going to be, again, a better real life quarterback day for him than a fantasy one. Evans and Godwin's are plays. Rashad White's okay. And again, based on where you had to draft him, you probably have to play him. I would be keeping an eye on Bucky Irving, though, because he is starting to really impress some people out in Tampa Bay. You're starting your Lions. Goff, maybe not, but Jameson Williams, you're starting, along with Gibbs, Laporta, Montgomery, Amon-Ra St. Brown. Also, Williams, still really affordable in daily fantasy at 5.3K. The Rams taking on Arizona. The Cardinals are favored by 1.5 in this game, and the total sits at 48. I don't get this line at all. I understand Puka Nacua is out, but I think the Rams are better than this. And better than Arizona, quite frankly. I think that a lot of my concerns about the Rams going into the season, I think we kind of talked about this in some other previews, kind of let cloud my judgment a little bit on them immediately. Because my concern is that there's going to be injuries, which there was, Puka, and Stafford's going to kind of start to fade as the season goes on. Well, he looked very good in week 1, and now this is a great option against Arizona here. Now, we just saw Buffalo. That offense is no joke. Maybe Miami's a little overrated on the defensive side, but I don't know if we can take from the Buffalo game that Arizona is as much of a sieve defense as we think because of what Buffalo did to Miami's defense on Thursday night. But this is still not a good defense. And so I do think that the Rams defensively will be able to hold up a little bit. They held Detroit to 26 points and kept it within 6. Are we saying that Arizona is only 5 points worse than Detroit? I am not. And so I think that the Rams take this one. I'm going with Rams just straight up to win this football game. Fantasy-wise, you are starting your Rams. Stafford is a fantastic streaming option this week. Kupp is a must-start every week that he is playing. Williams, same thing. Interested to see if we get a little bit more Blake Corum this week. Also, I am in daily going with the stack of Stafford and Kupp. Stafford at 6K, which is phenomenal value, and Kupp is coming in at 7.6K. For Arizona, I still trust Harrison and Kyler and Connor and McBride, and that's about it. Cincinnati taking on the Kansas City Chiefs. Kansas City is at -6 for this one, with the total at 48. I really dislike this matchup for Cincinnati. I think that they losing Reader really hurt this run defense, and I think Isaiah Pacheco has a field day in this game. And also, I don't know if they have the linebackers to help out on Kelsey or to be able to deal in a way with Rashee Rice that is going to be able to limit them. I know Lou Anarumo, is a very good defensive coordinator, but I have real concerns about what they're going to be able to like. The scheme, I think, will be fantastic. I just don't think they have the horses to really roll with this one. And I think, again, they only gave up 16 points to New England, but that's like giving up 50 to Kansas City. I think this is going to be a very eye-opening experience for the Cincinnati Bengals defense. And I think offensively, the struggles are going to continue. You can just put McDuffie on Jamar Chase. I'm not saying like, okay, Revis Island, it's done. But after that, if Higgins isn't healthy, and even if he is, it's a pitch count probably. Who's concerning you right now? I think this front 4 and front 7 is going to give the run game some real problems. And then I think the secondary is going to be able to shut down Chase. So I think this is going to be a real bad day for Cincinnati. I have Kansas City -6. From fantasy, I love Pacheco in daily. I think that Patrick Mahomes is a really good option in terms of fantasy this week. Shocking news, I know. Also in daily fantasy as well. But you're starting your Chiefs, right? Like Pacheco is getting the start. I'm putting Rice in. I'm putting Worthy in. I'm putting Kelsey in, obviously. Those are all plays that we are going with. For Cincinnati, it is Burrow and Chase. And after that, unless I have to play Higgins and he's healthy, I'm not putting Higgins into my lineup. Pittsburgh taking on the Denver Broncos. The Steelers coming in as 2.5-point favorites over Denver with a total at 36.5. I don't see what people see in Denver to keep this game within a field goal. I think the Steelers' defense is significantly better than what Seattle has. And look, I think Seattle has a good defense, but I think the Steelers' defense is just excellent. And so Bo Nix had trouble with Seattle. I get it was week 1, but holy hell. I think that we have a real opportunity here with the Pittsburgh Steelers defense that to go out and just annihilate this poor kid. So I think defensively the Steelers are going to be great. On the offensive side, another week of Fields in this offense with the Steelers, and I think that there's going to be a little bit more continuity there and a little bit more familiarity, so I think it's going to be an interesting one. I think the Steelers win this one probably a little convincingly, that they take this one, certainly by more than 2.5. From a fantasy standpoint, there isn't a whole lot that you can really trust in this game. Fields, if you're desperate, and you probably have to start the running backs and Pickens. On the Denver side, I would try to avoid Javonte as much as possible. If you have to, just based on where you drafted him, get it. But even then, I don't think he was being drafted in a spot where you have to start him. And I have some concerns about how he looked in week 1. Sunday Night Football, Chicago taking on the Houston Texans. Texans favored by 6.5 points. The total, is at 45. Swig of water for the working man. Lemon seed came out on that. Anyway, sorry. It is tempting to take Chicago here. I think this defense is improved. And I think for the offense, it can't be as bad as it was in that first game. The issue I have is even if it improves, it still might not be great. And also, this Houston Texans offense just looks like a juggernaut. And so I do think Chicago's defense is better than what Houston faced in week 1 against Indianapolis. I worry that it doesn't matter, though. And so that is my concern with this group. I think that the Texans offense just looks so good. And I think DeMeco Ryans scheming against a rookie in Caleb Williams could be a bit of a difficult one. So this is one where I'm not going to click on it. And honestly, if it gets through that key number of 7 as the day goes along on Sunday, it might be a Chicago play. But for right now, as crazy as it is, that half a point decides it, I'm going to go Chicago at 6.5. From a fantasy standpoint, I think you're starting your Texans, right? Like Stroud, Mixon, Collins, Dell, Diggs. For Chicago, you have to start more. Keenan Allen a little bit banged up. We'll see if he plays. If he does, I would hope you would have a better option, and I'm not starting any of the running backs right now. And then we go to Monday Night Football. It is Atlanta taking on the Philadelphia Eagles. Eagles favored by 6.5 with the total set at 48. I think the Eagles defense crushes this group. I have concerns about the offensive line in Atlanta. I have concerns about the mobility of their quarterback and what he is able to do. I think that this is going to be a masterclass by Vic Fangio and what he is going to be able to do schematically to just put a cap on this thing for Kirk Cousins and make it a really, really long day. Offensively, I brought it up. I have some slight concerns about Jalen Hurts and what this offense looked like in week 1. Yes, they put up some big points, but there were some decision-making issues that I had that I just have grave concerns about for this team. But they're still going to put up points, and Atlanta's defense, while better with Judon and Simmons as well, isn't necessarily built, I don't think, to help stop this team. So I think this is going to be a real wake-up call for Atlanta, and honestly, maybe a little bit of fool's gold for the Philadelphia Eagles, but the Eagles take this one minus 6.5. From a fantasy standpoint, you're starting your Eagles. It's Hurts, Barkley, Brown, Smith, and Goddard if you have to. And no Cousins at all for Atlanta, but London, Bijan, and Pitts. And that's it for the Atlanta Falcons. So those are the picks for week 2 in the National Football League. NFL, though, not the only football happening. I know everyone said, oh, football's back, football's back. Football been back since June. CFL, baby. Canadian Football League. 3 games this weekend. Let's break them all down. All right, if you want against the spread picks, I do those for 3 Down Nation for the Canadian Football League. So we're not going to be giving those out here. This is just going to be a breakdown and then a pick of who I think is going to win the football game. So first, Toronto taking on BC. Kind of a battle of the Titans, so to speak, at the quarterback position. It is Chad Kelly taking on Nathan Rourke. Deeds, welcome to the chat. Yeah, must win for the Stamps this week and not a good week for it. I will explain in a little bit. I went off on the Stamps this week in the 3 Down best bets. I'll give you some of the stats that I found from that game because that is holy crap, is that bad for Calgary. The stats don't look great for Toronto in their matchup with BC either, though. BC 4-1 record at home, 3-1 in Vancouver, 1-0 in Victoria. You have BC defensively, they haven't allowed a 300-yard passer at home since their home opener back in June against the Calgary Stampeders. Now, giving up 300 yards to Jake Maier is concerning, but they've bounced back obviously since then and have actually looked pretty good defensively. They are taking on the Argos, who have just one road win this season. Toronto beat Montreal 37-18 in week 6. That was a game Cody Fajardo had to leave. So they haven't beat a starting quarterback for 60 minutes on the road all season long. I think Kelly has kind of shown that he can put up his numbers, but he is not doing so in a way that's helping right now. That this team continues to lose with Chad Kelly at quarterback, and I think that continues this week with BC picking up a win over Toronto tonight, in the Canadian Football League on Friday Night Football. Saturday, it is Ottawa taking on Hamilton. I have a few stats on this. I'm not going to say it. Ottawa is a better football team than Hamilton is. And yes, Hamilton is at home. And that home field advantage is better than a lot of home field advantages you would think. They've only won twice. Both games against Toronto, who I just mentioned, not great on the road. So I think Ottawa just wins this football game. I have the Red Blacks over Hamilton. Now, Deeds. We talked before about... Sorry, my camera's not flipped, so I'm pointing at the chat, and it is in the opposite direction. But trust me, I'm pointing at your name, Deeds. The wheels have fallen off for the Stampeders. They've lost 4 in a row. They are 2-7 in their last 9 since they had to leave for their annual Stampede trip. And McMahon, which used to be a sanctuary for this team, isn't anymore. They just got beat. Back-to-back games. Ottawa and Edmonton came in to McMahon and beat this team. And so now you start to look at, okay, well, what was this at home for Calgary? And so I did a bit of a dive on the Stampeders' home wins this year. This vaunted 4-0 record. Week 1, they beat Hamilton, who's 1-5 on the road this season. Week 4, they beat Winnipeg, 22-19. Zach Collaros left that game because of an injury. And that was still when Winnipeg was really slumping and really starting to figure their shit out. Week 7, they beat BC 25-24. This is their best home win. It snapped the Lions' 5-game winning streak. Objectively, BC played pretty bad in that game, but I don't have like a big stat of, well, if they only did da-da-da-da-da. BC just played like shit. But Calgary can say they at least forced them to play like shit, so whatever. And then the last home win was week 9, 27-23 against Toronto. Cameron Dukes was still starting, and Calgary still needed a 21-point comeback in the fourth quarter as they played like doo-doo in the first 3. So that home record that you've been able to kind of bank on for a little bit as a reason for optimism, as you kind of fine-tooth comb that thing, it actually doesn't look that good. And then when you look at the rest of the stats, this team looks really bad. They are turning the ball over way too much. Calgary has 31 turnovers this season. That's the most in the league. They have the worst turnover differential at -15. The next closest team is -9. It has been a disaster for this group. Calgary has turned the ball over 21 times in the last 6 games. The most egregious, obviously, coming last week, where they gave it up to Edmonton 7 times. And yeah, Deeds, fallen off. This team is a truck on Edmonton Public Road, up on cinder blocks. There's no thread left on this team's tires. Yeah, no, they feel cooked. They feel done, quite honestly. But wait. It gets worse. The Stampeders, again, 21 turnovers last 6 games. Calgary has at least 1 turnover in 11 of their 12 games this season. They have at least 2 turnovers in 9 of their 12 games this season. The CFL average for turnovers in a game by both teams is 3.8. Calgary has 5 games this year where they've turned it over 3+ times, including 3 of their last 4. So they are doing basically all of the turnover per game average themselves. It has been horrendous, and it doesn't matter who's playing a quarterback. It's been happening. There's been some turnover on downs, which we'll get to maybe some reasons why for that in a second. There's been some fumbles. The one thing you could point to is maybe there's some bad fumble luck because Calgary has fumbled the ball a bunch and lost the fumbles a lot, and they've only recovered 2. That just, those sorts of things do tend to even out, but still, Like they have such a gap in the turnover department that even if they got all the fumble luck, they would still be one of the worst teams in the league in that category. And then when they do hold on to the ball, they don't do anything with it. Only Winnipeg has a worse points per game average this season. And so, of course, when I picked the under in that game, they scored 75 points or 78 points. That was infuriating, but not bitter or anything. They are tied for the third fewest yards gained on first down at 6.2. They are last in the league in second down conversions at 42.4. Calgary is also worst in the league on converting second down when they need 1 to 3 yards. 56.6% on second and 1 to 3 is 10% worse than the closest team. So they are putting themselves in awful positions on first down, where they are one of the worst in the league at yards gained on first down. So you are into second and medium. And honestly, second and medium, this team's actually done okay. Doesn't fit what the thing I'm spinning here, but they've actually been okay on that. But second and 1 to 3, they're getting stuffed. 56%. The next team was at 67.3, I believe it was. So like a 10.7% gap on what's supposed to be the easy ones. Those are the gimmies. They give you a yard in this league. How they are struggling on that is beyond me. And so that's where you get the turnovers on downs, because they are putting themselves in those disadvantageous situations because they're not converting on 2nd and 2, 2nd and 3. And then they're like, well, shit, 3rd and 1, we can get this. And then they don't. Also, the turnovers that are happening when you are putting yourselves in obvious passing situations, which 2nd and 4 kind of borderlines, which is what on average they are dealing with, but that's the average, so you know there's a lot that's worse. When you're putting yourselves in second and long situations, defenses know you have to pass. And what happens when defenses know you have to pass? Well, with Calgary, it goes to the other team. Also, the defensive side of the football, which was supposed to be the strength of this team this year, has been dog shit. You look at this defense, they have allowed the second most points per game in the Canadian Football League, allowing 30.2. They are also allowing the second most opponent's second most opponent net offense per game. It's a weird one. I think they're just the second worst in net defense, probably the way to say that. Calgary has also allowed the most average yards gained on first down at 7.5. This has led Calgary to having the second highest opponent second down conversion rate at 51.2%. They also have trouble stopping the run. Calgary has given up 116.9 yards per game on the ground, which is the most in the CFL during this During this 4-game losing streak, they have allowed the opposing team's leading rusher to get over 85 yards in 3 of them. The only game this didn't happen was when Brown and Leak were splitting the carries, and also McLeod Bethel Thompson almost put up 500 yards passing on him. So why the fuck would you run anyway? This is supposed to be the strength of this team. And you look at all of these numbers. No wonder they're losing. When they have the ball, they're turning it over. When they're not turning it over, they're putting themselves in really bad situations, so it's difficult to score. Also, their defense can't get off of the field because they can't get a stop on first down, which is probably due to the fact that they're giving up 116 yards per game on the ground. So when teams are running it, all of a sudden it's 2nd and 3, and the world is your oyster at that point. Everything is just so bad for Calgary right now. And now they're playing a Montreal team that's pissed off because they lost to BC by a ton last week and are refocused, with Ottawa kind of nipping at their heels now for the number 1 spot in the East Division. All of this points to me being quite surprised that the spread was only 5.5 this week. I will just say that. But again, for my full picks and more statistic breakdowns like this, check out my piece right now, 3downnation.com, looking at the best bets for the weekend. Guess which way I'm leaning on that one. All right, it is now time from a Football Friday to switch to a Fightin' Friday, as UFC Noche goes down this weekend from the Sphere in Las Vegas, Nevada. Let's break it all down. UFC Noche, Riyadh season, which is weird, but still, from the Sphere, Las Vegas, Nevada. In the main event, Sean O'Malley defends his bantamweight championship against someone who has long danced around this opportunity, Merab Dvalishvili. There's another title fight on this card and some interesting pieces on the undercard. So let's go through it with our main card breakdown. First, it is Ronaldo Rodriguez taking on Odi Osbourne in the flyweight division. Rodriguez is 25 years old, standing at 5'7", born in Veracruz, Mexico, training out of Prime Combat Academy. He is 16-2 for his career with 7 wins by knockout and another 5 by submission. Also one other little DQ win in there for you. Also 2 losses by decision. His last win coming against Dennis Bondar at UFC Fight Night in February of 2024. He won by second round submission. That was his UFC debut and is also putting him on a 6-fight win streak with 4 finishes. His last loss came on Dana White's Contender Series, and he has been a pro since 2017. For Osbourne, he is 32 years old, born in Kingston, Jamaica. At 5'7", he has a 73-inch reach, training at Black Cobra MMA. 12-7 for his career with 1 no contest, 5 wins by knockout, 4 wins by submission, 2 knockout losses, and 4 submission losses. His last fight was a submission loss against Rafael Filho at the Ultimate Fight Night in March of this year. That was a first-round submission loss. He has now lost 3 of his last 4 and has been finished in all of them. He's 4-5 in the Ultimate Fighting Championship, finished in all of his losses, and has finished 2 of his 4 wins. He has been a pro since 2015. I think Rodriguez is a bit of an interesting prospect at 125 pounds, and I think he continues that progression here. It just kind of feels done for Osbourne. All of those finishes in a row, and now you go up against someone who 4 finishes in his last 6 bouts. So I am going Rodriguez in this fight to get the win. Then we have Daniel Zellhuber taking on Esteban Ribovics. In the lightweight division, Zellhuber is 25 years old, born in Mexico City. At 6'1", he trains at Extreme Couture with a record of 15-1, with 7 wins by knockout, 3 by submission, and 1 decision loss. His last bout was at the Ultimate Fight Night card in February, where he picked up a unanimous decision win over Francisco Prado. It is a 3-fight win streak, all 3 by decision. He had a loss in his UFC debut, making him now 3-1 since joining the promotion in 2022. He got that contract by winning on Dana White's Contender Series in September of 2021, which was the fight that followed his last stoppage win in May of 2021 in Lux Fighting League. He had stoppage wins in 9 of his first 11 fights and has been a pro since 2016. He takes on Ribovics, who is 28 years old, born in Argentina. At 5'10", he trains at Killcliff FC. 13-1 for the career, 7 wins by knockout, another 5 by submission, his lone loss coming by way of decision. His last fight only lasted 37 seconds, and he won by knockout, beating Terrence McKinney at the Ultimate Fight Night card. That's back-to-back wins after his first career loss in his UFC debut at UFC 285. He had another finish, is another finish after a decision win, being his first. That came at UFC 290. He won on Dana White's Contender Series in 1:30 back in August 2022 and has been a pro since 2015. This is another one where it's a bit of an intriguing one, but I feel like there is really something here with Ribovics, to a point. Like, I don't think, well, future champion. But I do think that, given the explosive nature of a lot of his wins, he has kind of eased it back a little bit, but is still winning by decision. That shows a lot of maturity. I do think Zellhuber is on a pretty good run here right now, but I do think Ribovics ends up getting the win. I talked about this fight earlier. That one, absolutely. Fight of the night possibility there, Deeds. 100%. When you look at a couple of guys who both have experience with finishes, both on some winning streaks, again, back-to-back wins for one, 3-fight win streak for the other, I think a really, really high potential for fight of the night, 100% on that one. This one could be as well. You have Brian Ortega taking on Diego Lopez in the featherweight division. Ortega, 33 years old, born in Los Angeles, California. He has, at 5'8", he has a 69-inch reach and trains at Gracie University. 60-3 with 1 no contest, 3 wins by knockout, 8 by submission. He's been stopped twice in his career, both by knockout, and lost 1 decision. He is coming off of a submission win over Yair Rodriguez at the Ultimate Fight Night card in February. It ended a 2-fight losing streak, and he had lost 3 of his last 4. But as we mentioned earlier in the week, those losses, Rodriguez, former title challenger, Volkanovski, like the second best featherweight in the history of the sport, Max Holloway, very good at punching people in the head. So a very good 3-4 losing run for him. He has wins over Rodriguez, as we mentioned, Korean Zombie, and Frankie Edgar, along with Cub Swanson. His win over Yair Rodriguez was his first stoppage win, though, since 2018, and his first submission win since 2017. He's 8-3 with 1 no contest in the Ultimate Fighting Championship. He's been with the company since 2014. A pro since 2010. He has a first-degree black belt under Rener Gracie. Lopez, 29 years old, 5'11", a 72-inch reach, giving him a 3-inch reach advantage over Ortega. That's going to be big in a second here. Born in Brazil, he resides in Mexico and trains at Lobo Gym MMA. 25-6 is the MMA career, 10 wins by knockout, 12 by submission. He has been stopped twice in his career and lost 4 decisions. His last fight was a decision win over Dan Ige at UFC 303. It's a 4-fight winning streak. The first this fight was the first one that that lasted more than 1:40. He has been tearing through guys on his way up to this point in the featherweight division. The reason, or one of the reasons he lost his last loss, it was his UFC debut against Movsar Evloev, who we have found to be very good, and he took it on 5 days' notice. So you can kind of explain that one away pretty easily. 4-1 in the UFC, been in the promotion since 2023, coming off of a loss in 2021 on Dana White's Contender Series. A pro since 2012, he is also a BJJ black belt. I think that reach is going to be very important for him in this fight. Brian Ortega's stand-up game has improved immensely over the years, but he is still, I view him anyway still, as someone who needs to kind of get down on the ground. I think Lopez, because also a BJJ black belt, and because he has this reach, he has this explosive striking ability, he has this reach advantage, and he is well-versed on the ground. It makes him a very dangerous fighter. Yes, this is the best fighter he has ever fought, no question about it. But knocking out Sadiq Youssef in just over a minute, outpointing Dan Ige, proving that you aren't just a knockout guy, that you are someone who can put 3 rounds together, can put 15 minutes of quality fighting together, and getting that ring time and getting that experience. I think all of that leads to a very good performance here on Saturday night. I think we come out of Saturday, obviously we'll be talking about the 2 title fights, but we're going to be talking about another title fight, and that'll be the one that is up next, I think, for Diego Lopez. I think he puts on a show. I think that we have an opportunity here to, I don't want to say like, oh, the next big star in the UFC. He's 29. We'll see. But we have someone who I think is going to develop into a fan favorite. And so I think he uses that reach advantage that he has to be able to keep this fight standing, and I do think that you'll start to see him get a little bit more comfortable on the feet as it goes on and really start to land some of his power punches. For Ortega to not lose this, which I think you can all kind of see where I'm going with this pick, for Ortega to not lose, he is going to have to be, I think, a little bit more pressure on Diego Lopez, kind of like what John Jones talked about in his fight with Glover Teixeira. I'm sure there's a more recent example than that, but you know what I'm referring to. So he isn't able to use that long reach advantage. Once he can get inside, things start to open up for Ortega a little bit more, and it creates a few opportunities to create the situations where he would have the advantage in. I just think that's going to be tough for him to get into. I think the power of Lopez gets it, and so I think Diego Lopez ends up getting the victory. But this one also, Deeds, this one could also very well be your fight of the night. Co-main event, the first of 2 title fights on this card at the Sphere. First, it's Alexa Grasso taking on Valentina Shevchenko for the Women's Flyweight Championship. Grasso is 31 years old, at 5'5" and a 66 reach advantage. She's born in Guadalajara, Mexico, training at Lobo Gym. 16-3-1 for her career. 4 wins by knockout, 2 by submission. She has been stopped once by submission and has 2 decision losses. That draw, came in her last fight against Valentina Shevchenko when they fought to a decision at the UFC Fight Night card on September 16th, 2023. So almost exactly 1 year ago. That helped her retain her title after winning it at UFC 285. She has a 6-fight unbeaten streak, 5-0-1 with 2 submission wins in there. Her losses have come to Carla Esparza, Tatiana Suarez, and Felice Herrig. So some very strong, capable fighters in there. Overall, 8-3-1 in the UFC, and she's been with the company since 2016. Before that, she went 4-0 in Invicta and has been a pro since 2012. Taking on one of the greatest to ever do it, Valentina Shevchenko, 36 years old. 5'5" with a 66.5 reach advantage. Born in the Soviet Union, she trains out of Tiger Muay Thai. 23-4-1 for her career, with 8 wins by knockout, another 7 by submission. She has been stopped twice in her career, once by knockout and once by submission. Again, the last fight, the draw. That means it is now a 2-fight winless streak for Shevchenko after a 9-fight win streak. Her title loss to Grasso came after 7 successful title defenses. She has the most title wins in UFC women's flyweight division history. She has the most consecutive title defenses in UFC women's flyweight division history. She is the 2022 World MMA Women's Fighter of the Year. Her 2 of her 4 losses coming to Amanda Nunes, also lost to Grasso, and a loss to Liz Carmouche as well. 12-3-1 in the UFC. She's been with the company since 2015 and has been a pro since 2003. So it's been a long road for Valentina Shevchenko. These two have fought each other a lot. You get the submission win for Grasso, and then 5 rounds together back a year ago leads us now to this point. I do feel like this is one of those ones where Grasso's time has kind of come, and she has an opportunity to get a win here. The thing that I just can't get out of my head is Valentina Shevchenko, not only a very dangerous fighter, she is also a very smart fighter. And she is someone who I think kind of downloads information a lot and uses that information very, very effectively. Most, like, the scorecards were split for that one. It wasn't we had one dissenting judge and it fucked everything up. You had one for Shevchenko, you had one for Grasso, and you had a tie. And when you looked at the media cards, 11 of them were for Grasso and 11 of them were for Shevchenko. It was as close can get. I just feel like if you give Valentina Shevchenko 35 minutes to figure you out, she's going to figure you out. And so that is why maybe that this is, because a lot of times in MMA, when you have a fighter and they are just on this run and that run stops for whatever reason, it's just done, right? Like we've seen that a ton of times before where it just kind of, they just can't get that fire back for whatever reason. Shevchenko, though, has had to deal with that kind of adversity before. She lost to Grasso and then had a draw with her in their last bout, but also she lost to Amanda Nunes when she was on her come up, and this was like, okay, this is a huge fight. She loses that bout, and then she's able to get that run started again and work her way into being one of the great talents of this era of women's mixed martial arts. I said earlier this week, it is, from a what does she do next standpoint, so much more intriguing if Shevchenko loses, but the more I've been going over this one, the more I just don't think she does. I think Valentina Shevchenko gets the win here at UFC Noche, UFC 306. That brings us to the main event of the evening. For the men's bantamweight championship, Sean O'Malley defends against Merab Dvalishvili. O'Malley is 29 years old, born in Helena, Montana. At 5'11", he trains out of the MMA lab with a 72-inch reach. He is 18-1 with 1 no contest for his career, 12 wins by knockout, 1 submission win, and he has been knocked out once in his career. His last fight was a unanimous decision win over Marlon Vera at UFC 299, the first defense of his bantamweight championship, and he set a record in that bout with the most significant strikes landed in UFC bantamweight title history. His only loss came to Marlon Vera at UFC 252, so he has now taken that loss, not off the record, that it stays there for forever, but he got that, he gets his win back. So that was big for him to do that. Just his 3rd decision win in the UFC. He's undefeated in his last 7, 6-0 with 1 no contest. He has been in the UFC now since 2017. It's wild. He's been in the promotion 7 years now, man. 10-1 in the UFC with 1 no contest, an alumni of Dana White's Contender Series, and a pro since 2015. Dvalishvili, 33 years old, 5'6", born in Georgia. No, not the state, the country. He trains at Serra-Longo Fight Team, 17-4, with 3 wins by knockout, 1 by submission, and 1 submission loss. His last fight, a unanimous decision win against Henry Cejudo at UFC 298. That puts an exclamation mark on a 10-fight win streak that leads him to a title opportunity here tonight. Maybe he would have got there sooner, but 9 of those wins were by decision. We talked earlier in the week about why he didn't get this opportunity earlier, because his boy at Serra-Longo, Aljamain Sterling, was locked in a trilogy with Petr Yan to get the title opportunity. Dvalishvili has wins over Yan, Aldo, Marlon Moraes, Corey Stamen, and John Dodson. He's been with the promotion since 2017. He lost his first 2 fights in the UFC. And he's now 10-2, which follows, actually, the story of his career. He went 1-2 as a pro to start when he started off in 2014 and is now 17-4. So we talk about bouncing back from adversity. This guy bounces back from adversity. This one is about as close as we get in modern MMA to striker versus wrestler. Because it's not as simplistic as it was back if this was UFC 79, where like the striker could only strike and the wrestler could only wrestle. That's not how this is anymore. Dvalishvili is a good striker, and Sean O'Malley is an excellent grappler if it gets down into that level. So it's a very intriguing fight for that reason. I feel like O'Malley's range is going to be, again, very important in this bout. He is the taller fighter by 5 inches. I didn't get Merab's reach, but I can't imagine that it's a whole lot close to 72. And so this is, again, O'Malley, he has that length, he has that power. It's actually very similar to the Lopez strategy against Brian Ortega, where if he can kind of just keep him at range, this is going to be a good fight for him. Merab has to get this fight inside. He has to make this fight look ugly. He has to get the takedowns, and he has to be able to really wear on Sean O'Malley that way. The problem is, I think O'Malley is a skilled enough grappler that when this fight does go to the mat, he is still going to be there, and maybe he doesn't threaten off of his back as much, because I do think that that's something that really has changed in MMA over the last 5-10 years, is that like the amount of guys who you just like, you don't want to go to the ground at all with them because they are so much better off their back than you are in top control. There's like 3 of those guys. O'Malley isn't that dude, but he's going to at least be good enough that he is going to be able to limit the offensive opportunities that Merab would have in this fight. And so I love Merab as a fighter, and I am so interested to see how this fight plays out on Saturday and the interesting chess match, because it does, and this is something I get caught with a lot, it does feel simplistic to just be like, oh, O'Malley's the better stand-up fighter, so that means Merab can't do any stand-up. That's not the case. Merab is a very good stand-up fighter. It's just in this fight, it would behoove him to not be and to take this fight to the ground. But then when he takes the fight to the ground, because that's where he wanted it to be, that doesn't mean O'Malley's fucked either. Both guys are very, very close in the areas where the other has the advantage, that it makes it a very interesting fight. I just feel like that there's a couple more tools in the toolbox for O'Malley to be able to get this done, and I think the power that he has in the hands as well is going to be able to give him the edge. And so I think O'Malley wins this one. I think it is probably a razor close decision, but I think Sean O'Malley ends up getting it done in the main event. That is it for the UFC breakdown. But that, not the only big fight happening this weekend, as Canelo Alvarez steps into the ring one more time. Let's play the graphic again for another fight preview. Canelo Alvarez steps back into the ring this weekend against Edgar Berlanga in a fight that fans are not necessarily excited for, but still, Canelo Alvarez is one of the true greats to ever do this, and so anytime he steps into the ring, it is an occasion. Let's break it down. Canelo Alvarez is 34 years old, born in Guadalajara, Mexico, with a record that is insane. 61 wins, 2 losses, and 2 draws, 30 of those wins coming by way of knockout. His last fight, a unanimous decision victory over Jaime Munguia on May 4th, 2024. He has won 4 straight, all by decision to now push that 30 wins to being less than 50% finish rate for the career. The resume is insane. He is the current WBA, WBC, IBF, WBO, and Ring Magazine Super Middleweight Champion. He is a former WBO Light Heavyweight Champion, former WBA, WBC, Ring Magazine, and IBF Middleweight Champion, and the former WBO, WBC, WBA, Ring Magazine, Light Middleweight Champion. Hey, you want to know what's wrong with boxing? He has been one of the faces of the sport for a long time. That being said, the knockouts haven't been there as of late. We mentioned before, 4 straight wins, all by decision. His last stoppage win came against the guy who's fighting on the undercard for this card in Caleb Plant. That was back in 2021. So we've gone 3 years without Canelo Alvarez picking up a knockout victory. And so I do think that comes into play here today. I mentioned that Canelo is the biggest draw in the sport right now, which is why I thought it was hilarious when we were doing Ryan Garcia fight earlier. I think it was the one last year, earlier this year, one of his big fights. And it was like, well, this fight is for who is the face of boxing. It's like, is it? Because Canelo, in his career, has a pay-per-view revenue total of $925 million. This fight probably won't get him into the billion-dollar range, but it'll get him close, which is absurd. Also a statement on pay-per-view prices, but we're neither here nor there. He has been a pro since 2005 when he started at 15 years old, and he built up his resume very quickly. He fought 7 times in 2006, 7 times in 2007, 8 times in 2008, 7 times in 2009, 5 in 2010, and then 4 in 2011 before we start to settle into the groove of May and September with a couple November bouts thrown in there as well. He takes on Berlanga, who's 27 years old, born in Brooklyn, New York, 22 wins. He has never tasted defeat, 17 of his wins coming by way of knockout. His last win was a TKO victory over Padraig McCrory in February 24th of 2024. It ended a run of 5 straight decisions. That ended a run of 16 straight first-round knockouts to start his career. He has 3 successful defenses of his NABO Super Middleweight Champion. He started his career with 3 fights in Mexico and has been a pro since 2016. So the way that you can make this intriguing is look at the 17 wins by knockout, 16 of them coming in the first round to start his career, and see that there is absolutely dynamite in those hands. I just don't think it matters. Canelo's defense is like nothing that this guy will have faced at any point. We mentioned it before this week. He himself doesn't even have a Wikipedia picture, and he's only fought 4 guys who have Wikipedia pages. This is such a gigantic step up in competition for Berlanga. I do not think he will be able to connect with Canelo. The one thing that I think Canelo has to watch for in this bout is he, over the last little while, has had a tendency of starting slow. We saw it against Munguia where Jaime was winning round after round after round after round after round in the beginning, and it was Canelo kind of downloading the information, seeing, okay, what's going on, what's happening, how are we going to get this figured out, how do we do this, how do we do that, and then he comes out and he wins just enough to get the win. I do think that, like, Munguia is a significantly better boxer than Berlanga. All due respect, like, Berlanga, again, he's 22-0. He is former NABO super middleweight champion. But this doesn't even, with all due respect, doesn't even register on the amount of quality fighters that Canelo, he's probably not in the top 10 of the toughest guys that Canelo has had to face. So again, take this with that knowledge being said. I do think that Canelo has to be a little bit more on his game to start this fight. Berlanga, if he's going to shock the world, if we're going to Buster Douglas this motherfucker, he is going to have to do it early. And it is going to have to be in those moments where Canelo is still figuring out the range and still figuring out, okay, when I feint, he does this. When I do this, he does that. When I do this, he does that, and that is a fucking right hook from the heavens, then all of a sudden we have one of the biggest upsets in the history of this sport, or at least in the last 25 years of this sport. I don't think Canelo is going to get caught in that way. Berlanga will hit him, for sure. It's a fist fight. It's going to happen. But I don't think that he is going to be able to connect in the ways that he is going to need to pull off the surprise upset. So I am picking Canelo Alvarez to win this fight by way of decision. That is my pick for this fight. And so, thus ends another long one and a long week here at Couch Potato Diary. But you guys have been helping me out along the way with the help with the technical side of things and all of that. So starting Monday, we're going to be launching full throttle into this thing. Going to be actually promoting these streams and all of those things, and actually going to be getting really excited about it. And so I have the fall schedule again one more time. It needs to be tweaked slightly. The live streams on Kick are going to have to wait for a little bit. Still working that out, although I do think I have something in mind for that I might even try after this stream is done here today. But this is what it's going to be. We're going to be live on Twitch Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Friday. Thursday is going to be a pre-taped day and things of that nature. So this is what we got going on right now. Couple video games a week, but 4 live podcasts starting on Monday. The times for those are still to be determined. I was hoping to have this one done significantly earlier than today. I will try to be consistent with that, and if nothing else, I will try to at least schedule them in a way so you'll know ahead of time when they are going to be. But yes, if you are watching this on Twitch, thank you so much. I've had a blast doing these with the live chat going this week, so we're going to keep that up. Make sure you give me a follow. I would really appreciate it. All of these are going to be available in audio form wherever you are getting your podcasts. And if you missed any of it and you just like watching me talk, those are also up on YouTube. I break these all up into different segments. So this has been a bit of a stressful week for me, but it's been a whole lot of fun, and we're going to really build off of this one. So thank you guys so much, and let's have some fun next week. Enjoy the fights, enjoy the football as much as you can. Yes, consistently inconsistent. I am aware of that. But hey, we're getting better. Look, I said we would stream Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Friday this week. And we streamed Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Friday this week. All right? Did the words always match what the face was doing? No. But we got there. And so we're going to continue to get there here on Couch Potato Diary. Thank you guys.